This is the video for the Try It section of Lesson 26, Overview of Office Automation from Excel. In this lesson, you compose a macro using late binding that opens a PowerPoint presentation, and you may have recalled from reading earlier in the book that I explained the meaning and differences of early binding and late binding. In this lesson, I'm going to be using late binding. So the macro will be composed to open a PowerPoint file taking into consideration that the Office version is unknown, and so late binding comes in handy when you just don't know which Office version is going to be used with the macro that you create. So to get started, actually what you should do is, before writing the macro that you'll be seeing here that you'll be tempted to test, take a minute to open up PowerPoint yourself and save a PowerPoint presentation. It does not have to be anything elaborate. Just create a very quick one. You don't even have to put any slides or anything in there, but you do need to name a PowerPoint presentation and then save it into whatever folder path on your computer that you like, and then that will be the one whose name and folder path you'd be plugging into the code that you will be watching me create here. And this way now we could get started by going into the Visual Basic Editor. I've already created my PowerPoint presentation, so I have named it and it's all ready to go, and I'm going to plug that name into this code. I'm going to call this macro Open PowerPoint. And I'm going to declare some string variables. One of them is going to be for the name of the path that this PowerPoint presentation got saved into. Another will be the name of the file, my file name I'll call it. And my extension. After beginning with 2007, the file names for Microsoft application files got a little bit more complex. It used to be, just thinking about Excel for a minute, that the workbook name was always a .xls. And beginning with 2007, it's now .xlsx if the file does not contain code, and .xlsm if it does. And so, just as we don't know the Office version, because we're going to be using late binding, I like to cover my bases by declaring whether or not this extension will be, in this case, because it's PowerPoint, .ppt or .pptx, as you'll see in a minute. The my path variable will be defined by, I do this generically, and I know that everybody gets the point on this, but you never know when someone wants to see an example of how to declare a path variable. I like to put these extra hypothetical subfolders in there, and that gives people the gist that it could be C and whatever number of folders and subfolders that this, in this case, this PowerPoint presentation might have been saved into. Now take a look at the very end of this string here. Make sure that you place the file path separator character in here. That's the / character, and you just need to remember to do that. When you are having your literal strings or you're declaring a variable, whatever the case is, when you have a path name going, be sure that you have this / character at the end of your path. And then I'm going to say that my file name is, and what I named mine is PowerPoint Example 1. So whichever path you saved your PowerPoint presentation in when you test this code, and whichever name you gave it, that's what you'll plug into these areas here. And the next item to define is my extension. So I'm going to say if val, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second, application.version is less than or equal to 11, then. Now there's a couple things going on with this line. One is that Microsoft names its Office versions by number. So Office 2003 really to Excel is Office version 11. 2007 is Office version 12. 2010 is Office version 14. Microsoft skipped number 13. But the val keyword here is in case every now and then some of the earlier versions, 97 was notorious for this, had a 97 was like a 8.0 A or B or some of that kind of thing. And so I make sure that I have the val keyword in here to identify and have VBA recognize this as a number. And so then my extension equals .ppt, else my extension equals .pptx, and if. And that ends the if structure for declaring, and I can see that I made an error up there, application.version. Now I've defined all of these variables here, and I'm ready to move on with the part of the code that is going to declare a variable for what will be the PowerPoint object. So because it's going to be an object type variable, I'm going to first declare it as object type and then set it to create the PowerPoint application object, and that is how you do it in late binding. So it's APP PPT is what I'm going to name the variable for the PowerPoint object that we're going to create. And now you say set APP_PPT, the variable name, equals, and this is the key, create object, and in parentheses the name of the object that you are creating, which is going to be PowerPoint. .application. You enclose that in quotes and enclose that in parentheses, and that is how you declare and then set an object in late binding to be created. In this case, we're creating the PowerPoint application. So there's an interesting line of code here that I have forgotten many times in my VBA adventures, and this is something that when you forget it a few times, then you never forget it again. You have to set the application that you're creating, in this case it's PowerPoint, to visible. It seems like you shouldn't have to do that, because if you open up any workbook or Excel or PowerPoint or Outlook, whatever it is, it's visible when you open it manually. However, when you do it in VBA code like this, it is not by default visible, and I've run my codes many times not seeing an application visible that I was sure had been created, and rerunning it creates all of these PowerPoint or whatever objects that are unseen but piling up on my system, and then it messes things up on your computer, and I ended up having to reboot. So do remember this line of code here. The application needs to be visible, and then you would open the file from the application, the PowerPoint application that you created, and to do that you are still going to use this variable name APPT.presentations.open, and the file name keyword goes in here. And now I am comfortable having declared these string variables properly, and I'm going to say my path and concatenate it with my file name and concatenate that with my extension. And that is the extent of the macro that creates the PowerPoint, in this case PowerPoint object, sets it to visible, and then opens the presentation that I have defined up here in my string variables. So we'll go back to the worksheet. I'm pressing Alt-Q and either pressing the Alt-F8 keys or the macro icon on the Developer tab. There is the macro that we just wrote, and clicking Run will open that PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to get Excel out of the way here. And I only have 3 slides in here. I was on the campus of Michigan State University back in September of 2010 to attend a football game, and I hadn't been back there since I'd graduated several years ago. So there's Beaumont Tower on the campus, and there's me in the stadium. And as long as I was in the relative neighborhood, I stopped into upstate New York to see my parents And so there's me having lunch with Mom and Dad on that particular trip. It was a great time. Anyways, that's enough of my life. The code itself demonstrates again how to declare this object in late binding, PowerPoint in this case, that will open the PowerPoint presentation that you've created that you want to have open. And that is a syntax and how you accomplish that with late binding.